wanted in our admin notes. Are you? Yeah, sure.
And there's a sign-in sheet by my desk in the back if you didn't grab that. Oh, yeah. No. Did you hear that the cruise ship came in this morning at 6?
I saw it.
And then left because it couldn't go to
Yeah, that's the second time I feel like that happened.
Yeah, yeah. That'll show you. So thank you everyone for being here. I think everyone signed in the back at my desk back there. There's handouts in every seat. There will be a lot of places for you to fill in and take notes. And then there's also the survey at the end, so please make sure you do fill out that survey and give it back to me. And this is Jody. I'll let her take it away. Enjoy.
Thanks. So everybody can hear me, right? I can hear myself pretty well. My name is Jody Bierman, and I am a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator. I have done seminars for Concern for, I hate to say it, but somewhere between 15 and 20 years now. This particular seminar and one other nutrition seminar that's offered by Concern, I wrote those, and I'm responsible for updating them, so I really care about that evaluation form that you see next to you today, and I would highly invite any comments, suggestions, criticisms. Be kind though. Whatever would, I take those seriously, I look at them, and I make some changes based on those. So, since this seminar does come sponsored by Concern, and I know you guys are probably familiar that you have this benefit, but if ever you feel like you need some support outside of work for what's going on in life, I highly recommend you tap into this wonderful benefit. I've done it myself. My home base is El Camino Hospital. I teach their outpatient nutrition consults for them. And I have called Concern. There's an 800 number right there at the bottom of the screen. And when I called that 800 number, they had me hooked up with the person I needed to talk to really fast. If you have an issue that you would like to talk over with someone, this site offers 5 visits per issue per year. So you have a nice benefit available. All right, so this topic usually drums up quite a bit of interest. I think there's probably not one single American that doesn't at some point in their life think about weight and keeping it okay and all of that, because we honestly live in a situation where we have food everywhere. We have a rather sedentary society. I'm sorry, you guys probably can't see me. Okay, I'll scoot over this way. And so I think that the main reason why I thought this would be a good topic is not only that obesity is very present, but also that there's so much about health and longevity that's attached to whether or not we're able to stay at a healthy body weight throughout life. And so what this seminar is trying to do is point you in that direction, essentially. There's a lot of spaces for you to participate in this topic. This handout is not just a bunch of slides for you to take back. This is actually a workbook. So if you get some of those things filled out, you might keep it and look at it again a year from now and see how you would answer those same questions. Because the intent would be to promote good health for you throughout your life. One quote that I ran across, this was by a man named Jim Ron, and we're going to talk a lot about lifestyle patterns today that promote good body weight. And he said, take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live, which I thought, was pretty good practical advice. So this slide here, just to kind of kick off the topic, kind of a typical scenario. What you see is weight going up and down throughout life, and for various reasons. Maybe it's simply just a marriage, now somebody's cooking for you, or you're cooking for someone else, or it could be childbirth, it could be injuries that go on. There's just a lot of stuff that can affect our weight during our life. But the general trend is to go up over the years. Does anybody want to guess what the average amount of weight gain that we experience between the ages of 25 and 55 is? What do you think? 30%. It's actually 20. So yeah, it's about 20 pounds. And I've lived through those years already. And so as I look back, I thought, I think I stayed about the same. And I was going through this memory box that I had, and I ran across some place where I'd written my weight down in high school. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm 20 pounds heavier. So, part of that is just the effects of aging on the muscle and all that. But we typically gain about 1 to 2 pounds a year, and often it's during the holiday season. But it does tend to add up. All right. So the goal for today is that you would be able to adopt a lifestyle. That's the big key words there, that maximizes both energy, metabolism, and overall nutrition. Okay, one affects the other. We're going to talk specifically about nutrition and what are some elements that support metabolic rate. So, objectives: assess your risk of weight-related chronic disease. Spend some time doing that. We're going to look at lifestyle factors that affect both your resting energy burn and body fat storage. Okay? And we're going to end up with talking about a one-day menu and how it can point you towards a way to maybe pattern your diet for good weight control. So here are this is the obesity trends in the U.S. This goes up to 2014. And what's interesting about this is the blue line is adults and the red line is our children. And you see they've sort of gotten heavier right along the trend of the adults, but luckily it's starting to level off a little bit. So if you are at a healthy body weight yourself right now, what I would like to suggest is that if you have any influence on children, that really, since they tend to pattern themselves after they're adults, that these basic principles that we're going to talk about today are something really important to pass down to the next generation. So we know that the kids that are heavy, they have increased risk of heart disease, just like adults. Pre-diabetes, they get joint pain at a much too young of an age. They even can get sleep apnea, and of course, poor self-esteem. So we want to make sure to pass along the information. All right. So if you will open your handout and go to page 2, you have a place to fill in the blanks about just basically height, weight, and BMI. You don't have to do the math because on page 3 there's a BMI chart. So just find your height and then on page 3 and then move horizontally across to your weight. And then once you find your weight, go straight up to the top of the chart and you will see the BMI numbers. So a healthy BMI is thought to be under 25, so up to 24.9, and that 30 is obesity. So what do you think about BMI? Do you think this is a good assessment of a healthy weight or not?
Not.
Okay, why not?
Because it doesn't take into account muscle mass.
Exactly. So our weightlifters, our CrossFit people, they may be, our football players, they may be above the healthy range, but be completely healthy. But what healthcare providers know and what they use this for is that we know that when BMI is increasing, that increases risk of chronic disease. So it's still used in every physical. I'm sure you guys all are aware of that. That it will still be in your chart what your BMI is. It's a starting place at least. But what actually is more important or useful for disease risk is the waist to height ratio. Because it's an assessment of your body fat distribution, and it's valuable because, you know, we know that when fat is more present around the center of the body, that it's more metabolically active. It's probably going to be actually inside organs, and it's much more dangerous for you. So to get this ratio, you do your height and your waist. So if anyone wants to be brave, I have some tape measures here. You know, this is actually a workshop, right? So when you're looking for your where to take it, you want to be. They say you should stand with your feet like shoulder length apart, and then you feel for the top of your hip bone, and the tape usually goes right above that. It fits right between the bottom rib and the top of the hip bone, and usually ends up right about below your belly button. So let's just pass this pile of tapes down, and if anybody wants to just push them down, you know, check it out. Go ahead and do that. And I'll tell you how to interpret this number. So it's thought that you're in a healthy place when you measure your waist in inches. Oh, we got a whole discussion going on, don't we? Okay, when you measure your waist in inches, it should be no more than half your height in inches. All right, and we know that if it's more than half of your height, that we see increased risk for stroke, for heart disease, and one study was looking at individuals and lifespan, and they found that waist to height ratio was at 0.8. In other words, if the waist measurement was 80% of the height measurement, that could lead to a shorter lifespan by 17 years. Really significant. And that's a lot of life missed. Okay? Maybe we should start some on the other side. Okay. Shall we switch to the other side? You guys okay? Okay. I don't know if anybody's ever checked this before. It's kind of a newer trend. It's one of the things that I do sometimes in my office. I get the waist measurement because often the scales aren't always a great measure of progress for some people. They have a lot of, fluid retention, and so using your waist measurement can be very helpful. Okay. Looking again at page 2, there's a place for you to note any other health indicators that you know about yourself. How are your labs and your blood pressure? How do you generally feel about energy levels? And also some information for you to just think about your family medical history. Because it could be very well true that somebody is carrying a little extra weight, but yet all their labs are normal and they're one of the lucky ones. They're showing no signs of any kind of risk. But perhaps there was a parent that had a heart attack or a cancer or something like that. So that's what that's for. And then below that, it asks you to note your best adult weight. This is a very common question I ask in my office because I want to know if someone's a little bit, if they've gained weight over the years, where did they start as an adult, their best adult weight? Because that's a good baseline to kind of look at to see, they might be at a high baseline weight, but for them it was a very healthy weight. So it's just something to compare your current weight to. Has your weight changed over time? or not. All right, let's move on then. All right, so metabolism is, there's lots of energy requiring things going on in the body all the time. We have anabolic processes, and an example of that would be filling the fat cells with fat or building new muscle. And there's also catabolism, the breaking down of either sugars, proteins, fats for energy in the body. So all of this takes energy, and the baseline amount that you need a day is your resting energy expenditure. You can get this checked in a metabolic lab using indirect calorimetry. If you went to El Camino Hospital for it, it's probably about $2,000 to have that done. So it's much easier to use an equation. I have a predictive equation for you in the handout, which we'll look at in a minute. But to your resting energy expenditure, you then, of course, have your physical activity, and you have something else which is called the thermic effect of food. The last part of our seminar today, we'll talk about about that and what that means. So sometimes I have someone tell me that they feel like they're not eating very much, but they keep gaining weight. So it's very helpful at that point, if I have done this predictive equation on them, for them to keep a detailed food diary. And what I ask them to do to get an assessment of kind of where they are with their calorie intake is to record at least 3 typical days of eating. If you have them do it just 3 days in a row, it's, doesn't have to be that way, maybe one weekend day, a couple of weekdays, and then assess that for what's going on for calories. So I'm just wondering if any of you have ever kept a food diary before to check intake. Okay, so tell me a little bit about what that experience felt like to you. What was the benefit of that to you? Or what was the purpose? Yeah.
Mine was actually because I have chronic stomach issues and they can't find the root of the cause, so they've had me pilot like basically every diet that you possibly could, and so basically mine wasn't so much as like it was recording what foods I was eating, but it was also recording how I was feeling, and so it was very enlightening on like, okay, if I drink 3 milkshakes within my week, my body hates me, so like just finding those connections and was being the point of it.
So food and symptom diary, yeah. Yes.
It made it really obvious how hard it was to get, for example, enough protein recommended. Like I'd be like, oh, I'm having meals that have protein in them. And then when I was actually taking detailed diet, it would be like, actually, that was like half the protein I needed for the entire day, and I'm fine on carbs.
Yeah, okay, good. Any other thoughts? Food records?
Helpful for monitoring micronutrient intake.
Wow. Down to the small things. Okay. Did you discover something?
Now you've got apps that like record it all and tell you exactly what's in everything, and makes you realize just how many micronutrients you're missing in a day unless you're actively trying to find them in food.
Yeah, we really need a good varied diet to get everything we need, don't we? Yeah. Any other thoughts about keeping food records?
Every little thing you put in your mouth, you have to write it down, even if it's that little cookie at Forks Said Steak. Or whatever, even your drinks. I think that was the big one for me, was any drinks.
It's amazing how much mindless eating we do, really. And so the value that I get out of having people do that with me is that it just increases a lot of mindfulness. And sometimes people don't realize a couple 100 calories a day over every day, and now they're gaining a half a pound a week, a couple pounds a month, and it adds up. So this is a way to check whether or not they in fact have a slow metabolic rate, or maybe they just have some excesses. So that's the purpose of it. All right, so here is a list of what drives our resting metabolic rate. There's a lot of body processes there. And it's just interesting to pause and wonder for a minute, can the amount of calories that we spend breathing be adjusted? Well, probably not, but when I do a class for the pulmonary disease people, emphysema, COPD, they spend a lot more calories breathing than a normal individual. Gastrointestinal movements, can we actually change the way our body is, burning calories in the gut? Maybe we can. So this is some of the things to think about. But 60 to 70% of your calorie burn is from your resting energy there. Okay, so I'd like you to turn now to where the predictive equation is on page 5. Okay, so here's how you can figure out these numbers for yourself. It's basically the same equation for males and females. This is called the Mifflin-St. Jeor equation, and it's thought to be highly predictive for adults. You'll see the only difference between the male and female equation is the last digit. Men get to add 5 calories, and women have to subtract 161. So that's where we start. That's the resting energy expenditure. And then to that you would add a factor for your general activity level. The 1.2 is, I rarely use that. That's more of a bed rest activity factor. If I had somebody who was in a chair most of the day that was kind of disabled, I might give them 1.25. But the most common one is the 1.3, the light activity. You'd have to do quite a bit of physical activity during the day to use the 1.4 or 1.5. So 1.3 is most common. So you multiply that times your base and you have a predicted calorie need per day. We're going to learn later in the seminar about what over-restriction means, and while you're looking at this, I'll just tell you straight out that over-restriction to me is if somebody's eating less calories than what their predictive equation is pointing towards for the resting energy needs. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. All right, the factors that influence your resting metabolic rate, there are a lot of them. Some of these you can control, and some of these you cannot. Okay. Many of them are influenced by your lifestyle. So I'm going to start with one of them. We're not going to go through all of them, but a big one is age. So after age 20, we lose about 5 to 10% of our muscle every 10 years, generally, unless we do something to compensate for that. So what that does is changes our need for energy. And by age 50, if we don't pay attention to things, we can easily be gaining weight because we are burning 15% fewer calories than we were when we were younger. And here's where the mindfulness comes in. You have to pay attention to actually true hunger signals and stop eating when you are just satisfied instead of when you're full. And that's how your body should have a pretty good perception of what you need for energy. And if you don't pay attention, you can see by the chart, if you look over in the bottom right-hand corner, by age 70, you're going to be 50 pounds heavier than you were when you were 20. So it's real important to stay mindful. So there is a personal accountability piece to this whole weight control thing. Your parents gifted you with your frame size, as well as many other genes that are associated with obesity potential. There's actually more than 300 genes that are involved, so lots going on. So you can thank them for your frame size. You can also thank them for your body fat pattern. Okay? So when you look at the two little icons on the right-hand side, which do you suppose is the healthier body fat pattern? The healthier one? The hair, that's right, because it's not that visceral fat. Okay. So what if your parents or your genetics are pointing towards obesity? I don't know if anyone in the room can speak to that. Sometimes there are people who overcome that genetic tendency for weight, and I wonder if anybody here would be in that scenario. Okay, so what is different, do you think? How did that work out?
I think, well, for my parents from Germany, and all the relatives we've ever seen pictures of, everybody was obese. And I think after wartime, there was a time when they were starving. Both my parents, I think afterwards, it was like make up for it. And I think being in California, California, having moved here, and my brother and I being raised here, and they enrolled us in swimming like when we were 5, 6 years old, and so we've always been athletic. And so my brother and I pride ourselves that we're the 2 first non-obese members of the family.
Well, congratulations. Yeah, that's a perfect example of how your lifestyle is a big part of this. And so even like kids that were from parents in the South, you know, the Southern diet in the U.S. is very high in fat. It's very warm and muggy there. People are not inclined to go hike the trails like they are in California or Colorado, and the obesity rates are a lot higher. So there is hope even if your genetic factors are in place. One other thing that that is genetic is your natural inclination to move or not to move. We call this the NEAT factor, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So if you tend to be like this guy sitting in the chair, the old couch potato, you know, that's something to think about. This was studied at Mayo Clinic back in probably about 2005. There were studies done by Dr. James Levine. And what he did is he brought people into his research center for 10 days and had them wear undergarments that were embedded with the same motion sensors you put in fighter jets. So basically their movements were tracked every 10 seconds. And he was just wanted to see, you know, there were some people that had a higher % body fat and others that were lower, and he wanted to see if there was a correlation there. And he did, in fact, find that it was true that the leaner subjects actually spent 10 times more clock time moving than the obese subjects. And these people were not allowed to exercise in his research center. These were just, they could go about their normal daily activities. They were all fed the same food, but there were some that had a natural inclination to get up and move more. So if you're that couch potato type, if you want to change, if you want to get more of a metabolic advantage, you have to make your environment more difficult to sit and be sedentary. So let's talk about that for a minute. What would be some ways that people can do that?
Drink a lot of water. You have to go to the bathroom.
Yes, and the kidneys is one of the 4 organs that burn the most energy in the body. That's true. Okay, what's another way?
Own a dog.
Yes, poor little pup has to get out. Yeah. Anything else? There's a lot of things.
Standing desks.
Standing desks, yes. Exactly. Okay. Standing just burns more energy than sitting. Think about how you get your car washed. You know, do you always drive through? If you have a lawn, how does the lawn get cut? You know, just all these little things. When my great-grandmother was establishing her home on the plains of Minnesota, you know, she had to bake 20 loaves of bread a day, you know, and wash all those clothes for her 10 children to be, and all the people that were working on the farm. You know, it's just these days we just don't. Sometimes we have to make it a point to get moving. So when we look at physical activity, now you can turn to section 4, page 7. This is something just to bring you through some self-reflection about your physical activity currently. You know, how do you feel about your fitness level? How often do you exercise? What type of activity do you do? And what do you like or not like? Because a lot of times people start off with good intentions with exercise and then they fall off the wagon. So why is it so difficult to stay in a good exercise pattern? Human behavior is interesting. This is a big part of your energy equation. Why is it so hard for us to stay active? Or maybe it's not. I'm looking at a pretty fit group, I think, here. Okay, some kind of injury.
Time. Lack of time.
Yes, time.
Work.
Big one. I gave a seminar yesterday in Gilroy, and one of the ladies there, or no, it was a gentleman, he said, you know, you have to commute from Los Banos to Gilroy, and then I work my day, and then I gotta get home, and then we have to make dinner, and you know, just all these things. And so we have to figure out a way to work it in that case, 10 minutes at a time. We know that accumulated activity is just as important as having a final grand total, you know, all in one shot.
maybe where you can work out too? Like if do you have to go to a gym? Like how accessible is it anywhere you can be active?
We're
Yeah.
lucky here, our weather's good year round pretty much. So we're gonna knock you over the radar.
Yes.
It's an exercise.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, walking through that wind.
But I kind of like that idea of running to the bathroom all the time. You can go to one that's far on the other side.
When I increased my water, I was like, wow, it's like every hour on the hour. I'm refilling my water bottle and going to the bathroom, make sure I got us every hour. For sure.
Yes.
I think,
Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say a lot of our jobs here, I mean, probably not cousins and folks, but I'm in IT, I sit a lot. I mean, we can stand up and sit down, but we're calm, like all day, and then you get in a car, or, you know, if you have to drive far, and by the time you get home, you're just like, okay, I've been at rest for 9 hours straight, it's hard to get up, which is why I do my physical activity in the morning. Or I would never do it after work, that's just me.
There's a wonderful tool on our smartphones now, right? The step counters,
Yep.
right? Those are good awareness. Did you have something to add?
Sorry.
That's good too. It sounds like you need alarms, because I agree, I work in a job like, and it's just too easy to stay on your computer, and I work through a lot of lunches, and, because it always feels like you gotta keep up around here, and also, we're all very service oriented, and one of our colleagues emails us, and, you know, they're not demanding I get back to them right away, but I feel I must.
True.
And,
If you email me, I'll
yeah,
let
at
you know
some
my desk.
point, it's almost organizationally, our culture has to change a little bit in terms of at least get up for lunch, at least take that break, or walk around your floor, even if you just walked it once around, that would take like, what, 2 minutes?
Yeah, just a couple of minutes here and there can make a big difference. That all adds up. That's good. So if you do go out and do some formal exercise activity, you know, the effect on your resting metabolic rate varies quite a bit. Depends on the intensity and the duration of the exercise activity you're doing. And we know that men have, there's a greater effect on a formal exercise on the resting metabolic rate of men than there is on women. And I think it's just because of the muscle mass, you know, potential for, it's more, the testosterone grows muscle faster in men, and so it would affect the baseline faster. So create some sort of, at least some unavoidable physical activity, and think about strength training. You know, I have in my little tiny packet here, I have a tool for strength training. Maybe you guys are familiar with these. Okay. I mean, you could be sitting and reading something on your computer and, you know, working the legs a little bit or whatever. So just be creative and you'll get ahead a little bit. Okay, so these are MRI cross sections of a thigh, the leg. And we just look like we could cut ourselves into steaks like this, you know. The one on the right is a high muscle to fat ratio. Probably a weightlifter, I would guess. Probably a male, because this is pretty significant muscle there. The white on the outside is fat. The white dot in the center is the thigh bone. What do you call it, femur? Is that right? Yeah. On the left side is the median muscle to fat ratio. So this is somebody that's maybe not quite as fit. I have seen cross sections of an elderly person where it's almost shocking. You look at it and it's almost all white with a little ring of muscle around the bone. Just not much left.